Hey everyone, Amber here with Amber's Berries and Buds. This video comes to you today on doing two things. One, I've switched out tanks and upgraded to a 20-gallon long for my planted tanks, which I will maybe include a few snippets in this video. This 10-gallon used to house all of my plants. Amazing, they all fit in a 10-gallon, right? Well, it's been cleaned out and it's now going to be the new home for my black rose colony, which unfortunately is much smaller due to a hydra outbreak while I was doing an algae blackout. Anyway, the remainder of my colony will be going in this 10-gallon, which is technically an upgrade from what they have been in. I'm also trying out something a little bit different this time. This is a corner HMF filter that I got from Matthew Grant. Trying this out for the first time. I've seen just a couple of people with these corner filters in their tanks. I think Christina Ha made one or got one somewhere. But I just wanted to try it because, one, it's a huge biofilter compared to some of the sponge filters that I've been running. And two, honestly, I've been really disappointed with the suction cup sponge filters. I have two in a previous tank and they seem to clog at the drop of a hat. And the amount of water flow and air that's actually coming out of them really slows down. And I mean, I'm talking about I could clean it, both sponges, one day, and then in the next 2 days the airflow would be stopping. And it's nothing wrong with my air pumps, as I've switched them out 3 times. It seems to be something wrong with just the air flowing through the sponge. So I wanted to try this out. I do have a water test in a bucket that I did earlier. I will include in this video as well, but just wanting to show you the general setup of this. The filter that Matthew made for me actually has magnets attached to it since I can't do anything with the silicone. These are the magnets here and here as well, although you can't really see it because it's black. This is showing you a little inside of the filter. Sorry for the glare. But it is your basic air pump. I'll move my light right here. You can see down inside. It goes almost all the way down to the bottom. Now what Matthew also did for me is created a space large enough that I can put my heater in here, as I have a Cobalt Neotherm. So I've got enough space to actually put the heater inside the filter instead of it being an eyesore in the tank, which also is really nice. There's a lot of room for me to put any kind of biomedia if I want to, which I probably will just to help it cycle a little bit. In addition to, I'm throwing 2 additional sponges from the previous tank in this one because this sponge is not yet cycled. Next I'll be filling it up with substrate and then filling it up with water and actually running it for you guys. Just a short little video of this baby working on a 5-gallon bucket. Now I have the magnets on mine, which is probably the only reason that it's working on a curved surface and staying in place. I've got the water level filled almost to the top. And it's doing a great job, even in a bucket. So for all intensive purposes, I have filled up this tank. Now granted, I haven't filled it up all the way that I possibly can, just because I'm going to let it run, get this silt and cloudiness from the substrate, you know, me stirring it up, get that out of the way, and then I'm probably going to just do a slight water change and put the water that my shrimp are currently in, which is probably about 3 gallons in there. So I just did enough to let the filter run. I did have to put my top on as for now to let it run because with the bubbles there is a good bit of splashing and everything, which actually is quite wonderful for the aeration and flow. As you can see here, it is putting out quite a bit. It's very nice flow, lots of bubbles. I will do this again whenever it has cleared up. Just wanted to show you right now to see how cloudy it is and see how long it takes for this to actually clear up. Okay, so it's been a few weeks since I've had the HMF filter set up in my tank. It has had enough time to seed, in my opinion. Usually takes about 2 weeks for a filter to completely seed from a seeded filter, which is this sponge filter right here. I've left this sponge filter in my tank even though I'm positive that the HMF has been seeded. I did have some babies to come about in the time of this filter being seeded, so I just left this sponge filter on because, as you can see, I've got quite a few little baby shrimp here. And they're so cute. Anyway, so I have left this sponge up and running for the purposes of this video. It doesn't detract from the HMF filter. It does add a little bit of flow to the tank. But with what I found with the HMF filter, I will be running another, probably just Airstone. It won't necessarily be in the tank where you can see it visibly, and I'll explain that a little bit later in the video. I can't really show you flow very well because my crypt doesn't necessarily move unless there is a very strong flow, because this crypt, balancei, I think is what you call it, it doesn't really move in just gentle flow. It's a very thick plant. Also, I have lots of dead physidens in the tank, which if you had followed one of my posts on Facebook groups, this is because I did a recommended bleach dip, which I do not recommend, and I recommend the potassium permanganate, which actually I did a video on just last week, and you can watch that there. I also have some subwassertang, or Pelia as many people will call it. That's pretty much the greenest thing in my tank right now. I've left the physidens in the tank in hopes that it will come back. I do have one ledge down here that seems to have sprouted a few little sprouts, and so that actually gives me some hope. And also my Disco Bee sticker down here that I have transferred through many tanks, so it's a long-lived sticker. Yay, Eric! Anyway, back to the purposes of the video, which is the HMF filter. So you can definitely see bubbles flowing all around this tank. There is a nice flow going on. I love this filter as far as how it actually does flow. Because of the way it is placed in the tank, it's placed in the corner. And I'm going to move this light here. It's placed in the corner of the tank with the spout actually coming out at a diagonal. So with it being on the diagonal, the entire flow runs along the diagonal of the tank. So there really isn't a space that it does not actually touch with the flow. And I am absolutely stoked about that, because I have some issues with the sponge filters that the water and the air just go straight up, and I know it does have a billowing effect, but sometimes I think that maybe there would be some dead spots because there is no directional flow on a sponge filter like the one that I have. There are directional filters, directional sponge filters, in the ones that have the suction cups on them. However, I have had several problems with many different air pumps in these sponge filters losing efficacy in the long run, even with regular maintenance and regular cleaning, that they have problems getting clogged and blocking airflow the longer they're actually in use. I don't know if anybody else has had problems with that, but I have. I also have had many filters that needed to be entirely replaced, new ones ordered, because the suction cup on the back just absolutely gave out after months, after a year, something like that. I'm really getting tired. I know they're only $3 or $4 a piece, but I'm getting tired of replacing sponge filters every couple of months because the suction cup failed. So I'm just pretty much done with the suction cup sponge filters, and definitely recommend another method other than those. But as you can see, this corner filter, it was the entire height of my tank. I had this one custom made for my 10-gallon and to also be just under the tank lid, because I do have a glass lid on this normally. It's not shown for the video because it would be hard to move around, but there is a glass lid that will sit on the corners in the lip here on the tank. So this filter actually does just come right under my lid. I mean, absolutely perfect measurements, custom done. Thank you so much for that. Now let me show you a little bit of these filters here. Now I have 3 filters minus the 2 that are on the sides of the tank here. I've got 3 separate sponge filters that I can take out at any point and clean. Now how you're supposed to take these filters out is kind of up to you. What I found the easiest way to take these jokers out is to actually take them out in the front here. You just push down on the sponge and take it out up front. Don't actually try to lift it out of the slot where it's in. The reason being is whatever you have actually possibly attached to the front of the filter, you will be kind of shaving off as you pull it up because these sponges are packed in quite tight. And I did that one time. I had some plant matter and a couple of roots, and I basically just cleaned all of that stuff off in my tank, which kind of made a lot more of a mess than it should have. So I learned the hard way how to take these sponges out. Now I will actually kind of give you a little glimpse inside here. There's really nothing inside with the exception of the actual tubing, and Matt has actually given me an area that I can put my heater, and this is a cobalt heater that's suction cupped in there. So I have plenty of room for my heater. I probably have room for a lot more gadgets, but I don't actually need anything back there. Now I did do one tiny modification on this. I have some pretty stiff tubing. I do this just because I don't really care for the kinking, if there is any kinks or if it gets crimped, you know, the flow actually stops. And as you can see, I'm pressing this pretty good here and it does not kink. It doesn't crimp at all. Because it's so stiff, I did actually have to modify the plastic tube that it connects into right here, and I had to cut that down a little bit so that the stiffness of my tubing would actually lay flatter here. Otherwise, this plastic tube down there was actually as tall as the filter here. So my tubing was coming up and pressing up against the glass and causing the glass to actually come up instead of laying flat. So I just trimmed that down a little bit. It was a very small modification for me. It may not be necessary for you. I've also had this custom made to be magnets instead, which I mentioned in another video, that this is done with magnets instead of being siliconed in my tank. I'm going to attempt to take these magnets off. Not easy. I finally got this thing off. So these are the magnets that are actually on the outside of the tank here, as you can see. I do have spaces. There's 2, one there, and then one down here. Ow. Yeah, don't do that. Those things pinch. They're really on there. Anyway, so I did not have time to silicone this filter in my tank. I needed this tank up and running the same day to be able to put some stuff in it. So I think normally he would have you silicone the sides and silicone the bottom, or maybe it's just the bottom to actually stay put in your tank, but for my purposes I did need the magnets, so he gave me magnets, and they're also on the other side as well here. And they're actually really good background holders. But you can see a little bit more, sorry for the glare, a little bit more inside. It's just the inside of the tube. I do have this on a very low setting coming from my pump because I've got the 2 filters in between. I can actually adjust the flow on my pump and make it come out a lot faster, as you can tell. Which I don't need it to come out like that, not while the 2 filters are running. So I said I was going to explain the reason I'm going to continue to have an Airstone in here. The reason I'm going to continue to have an Airstone, I'm actually going to place it in the back here. I'm lifting up my light so maybe you can see in the back. Now you can tell there is not really anything going on as far as water movement on the top. Now I know that there is water movement in the back of this filter as far as where the sponges are sucking in the water and it's going in the back. So under the surface of the water there is water movement. However, because this portion of the actual filter, the water behind, is not privy to the water movement that's actually outside of the tank. The top of this water right here actually stays pretty stagnant and will develop a film pretty quickly on it. So what I'm going to do is put a small Airstone just in the back here, kind of close to the top, so it's not interfering with the actual movement of the water and the air from the bottom of the pump. It's just going to be for the sole purpose of keeping water movement right in this little area to keep it from being stagnant, or not necessarily stagnant, but to keep the protein film or any of that film from developing right here, because it did kind of get a little messy at one point and I did need to clean off the tubing from the filter. So overall, you can see in my tank here, I am incredibly pleased with this filter. I am very, very pleased with the movement of the water, with the direction of the water, with how powerful this thing actually is. I'm pleased with the surface area of the sponge. As you can see, like I said before, this thing actually is almost a third of my tank, but it's almost barely noticeable in respect to the rest of the tank, what's going on here. This is a very simplistic scape because it is my breeder tank for my black rose, which I love to show in my videos. But the surface area is quite amazing as far as it's as tall as my tank. It covers, you know, that whole corner back there. If I can actually get a 3D rendition of that without you just seeing reflections. Overall, I'm incredibly impressed with this filter. I'm impressed with the custom work that was done by Matthew. He talked to me the entire time throughout, got my dimensions. It was just a standard 10 gallons, so it was fairly easy, but he got my dimensions. He emailed me a couple of drawings and blueprints for the actual filter. Was very precise with the measurements, told me exactly what the process was going to be, was very vocal throughout it all. I'm very appreciative of sellers that take this kind of pride in their work and that are vocal with their buyers. I think that is of utmost importance for a buyer and a seller to communicate with each other so that the buyer knows what the seller needs, what the seller wants, and the seller knows what, or excuse me, the buyer knows what to expect with the whole process, instead of this is what you're buying, this is how much it is, and it'll get to you when it gets to you. I love that absolute communication. That's a very respected buyer, a very respected seller, excuse me, in my opinion. And so I rate this experience quite highly in some of my transactions that I've had with other sellers. I'm just going to zoom in kind of on this flow a little bit so you can see. This is an absolutely wonderful flow. I love this filter. Now, if you want to get a custom-made filter yourself, you don't actually have to get it in black, as I have seen this filter come out in an alien color green with some black sponges, which would match my gaming mouse. And I've told Matt that. He does have some custom options for you to do. Like I said, this entire process is custom. This is not really a standardized process yet. I'm guessing he might probably streamline it a little bit later, but all of this is custom work. You talk with him one-on-one. His website is printedreefingsolutions.com. He does have these filters on there. Don't be afraid of the website name, it being a reef tank and everything. He is branching out into the freshwater area, which is why he has started making these filters. So please visit his website, take a look around. I don't know if he has a Facebook page, but if he does, of course, like it. But definitely visit the webpage, look around at some of these filters. If you're wanting it for a shrimp tank, I highly, highly, highly recommend this filter for a shrimp tank. I have been nothing but pleased with this entire experience and with the outcome result of this tank and how it looks. I absolutely love how this tank looks. The filter size does not bother me in one bit. Again, his website is Printed Reefing Solutions. I hope you've enjoyed this video of my review, and I've given you a couple of tips and tricks to help you with your HMF corner filter through trial and error of what I've learned by using mine. If you like what you see, please subscribe to my video, my YouTube channel. I also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/berriesandbuds. And of course, I have a website, berriesandbuds.weebly.com. This has been Amber's Berries and Buds. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching.